What's going on, y'all? KM Best here. Let's talk about the best deck in Marvel Snap. Now, I know what you're saying. KM, I can't believe you're making another Prof Cannonball video. I get it. There are going to be other builds of this deck in this video that do not involve Prof and Cannonball. I do want you to understand that. However, it would be, I think, intellectually dishonest to not start a video about this deck, the ways you can customize it with the baseline here. We have El Generico. This is your very straightforward, I put Thena into the deck that was already good deck. And yeah, it turns out it was already good and Thena makes it reasonably better. Having a card like Thena that is very, very good with your Professor X, a card that you can like add power to X post facto in the context of Professor X, is astonishingly powerful in what was already a very competitive and powerful deck to play. Now, I don't want you to look at me and be like, KM, I can't afford this. I understand there's going to be other builds on there. Maybe you'll be able to afford one of those. However, it is, again, intellectually dishonest of me to not present what I would consider the baseline for the metagame. This is the deck. Like, what are we talking about here? This is the deck that sets the baseline. You're going to be playing against this a lot, with substitutions being made, but the basic premise is going to be the same. We are an Angela Thena deck. Our combo at the end is Professor X and Cannonball. If you can't deal with that, you're going to lose to it. And we'll get to that when we talk about the other decks. Prof X Cannonball is astonishingly powerful. I think of this deck as sort of analogous to Splinter Twin in Magic the Gathering, where you have this combo at the top end of your deck that is also like a fairly competent tempo deck. And that is sort of the real awkward thing about where this deck is positioned right now. There's just not a lot that it's actually bad at when it does what it wants to do. It can lock opponents out of the game with Prof Cannonball, giving it good matchups against things like Hela, giving it good matchups against things like Bounce. It has a lot of cards that move around, and I think that also sort of helps the Prof X stuff. It has two very good scalers in the form of Angela and Thena, both of whom go well with your plan of winning two lanes. This is a very classic Marvel Snap deck, in my opinion. People get very caught up in like the details of Marvel Snap cards, but the fundamental thing about this deck is you play a card that says win a lane, that's Professor X, and then you play another card that says win a lane, and that's Cannonball. And so you jump through those hoops, and then both of those cards say win the lane on them, and then when you put that together, it says win the game. That's the deck. For the first time ever, I am sponsored by another game. That game is Aethera, a new mobile turn-based squad RPG that features a huge roster of unlockable heroes and challenging strategic combat. Set 10,000 years in the future, players must journey through dangerous past worlds to collect lost history and take down the evil AI, Harmony, that reigns supreme over the world. Aethera is the first game to reward players with amazing real-world collectibles, as in not digital collectibles. Compete for the chance to win exclusive limited edition coins delivered to your door that feature unique characters from the game. You can download Aethera now on iOS and Android in Canada. Unfortunately, it is only limited to Canada, but it is coming soon worldwide. Follow Aethera on social media or sign up for the newsletter on aethera.nicegang.com to be the first to know when they launch worldwide. Thank you so much to Aethera for sponsoring this video. Now, it's not the only thing you can do with Thena, Ravonna, Angela, Kitty stuff. This is the deck that Zombies Go Nom Nom used to climb all the way. I believe he hit rank 1 with this list, and it is quite good. I did run into a couple things when I was playing this list. One was that Shang-Chi felt just like absolutely 100% useless, just absolutely incredibly unplayable, just did absolutely nothing in any of the games I played. I played like 30 games of this. It was just always ass. And I think that that is notable to the point that I even tried replacing him with Miss Marvel to be better into the other Prof people doing this stuff. Hopefully, like I was like, okay, I'll see Prof X Cannonball stuff. I'll be able to like beat that with a Miss Marvel. But in this deck, you play so many twos that maybe you actually can't do that. We'll come back to that when we talk about the third deck, by the way. And so we have this situation where it's like, this deck does many of the same things, but it's not actually reliant on Prof X Cannonball, and it is very good, which suggests to me that, yes, Professor X is a problem, but I also think that maybe just this package of good cards will sort of persist regardless. This Angela, Thena, Ravonna type thing does seem incredibly powerful. With the addition of Sage, it's become like a very potent points package. And then what you're doing on the top end is sort of almost irrelevant, right? Like it matters, but as long as it says, win the lane or whatever, it's kind of whatever dealer's choice you want to make, right? And so in this deck, what we have is Shang-Chi, we have Shadow King. This deck is built at dealing with other decks playing Thena and Angela, right? Where I was trying to include Miss Marvel to deal with Profex, this deck is saying, I'm going to be a Shadow King deck, I'm going to be a Shang-Chi deck, we're going to deal with the Thena, we're going to deal with the Angela, and we're going to accomplish our goals that way. But ultimately, it's sort of window dressing around this very powerful package of 8 cards or so, which is just, the cards that move, like Nocturne and Jeff, the Ravonna package, and like all of that stuff feels like it's the actual powerhouse of the deck. So yes, I do think Prof X Cannonball is the best version, just like default, there's a reason it's the default. But there's a lot you can do with the shell of those cards, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if those ended up looking nerf worthy as well, the more this starts to develop. In fact, while I was filming this video, Zombies jumped into chat to point out that he's trying Legion in the slot that Shang-Chi is in, because he also agrees that Shang-Chi just kind of did nothing, and it's almost not the entire point of the deck at this point. Like, it is such a remarkably powerful package, the like baseline stuff that we're doing here, that the top end is important, but not necessarily make or break for it. So one of the cards that I wanted to try instead of Miss Marvel was Klaw, and I got kind of obliterated by 2 players on the ladder, JF and the store manager, who were playing this deck with, they had an Echo in there. I replaced it with Nocturne because I'm a Nocturne simp. But I do want to make sure that they get their credit. I believe it was the store manager's list originally, and what this deck is doing is saying, I'm going to beat the Prof X Cannonball decks in the mirror straight up. We're playing Iron Man, which is very hard to deal with in terms of Cannonball. Nobody is playing any tech for that right now, except maybe a Red Guardian, but they're always playing the Red Guardian on your Angela, your Jeff, whatever. No one's ever saving that. And we have Klaw to dominate Professor X lanes. That is a very powerful combination, and it really speaks to, again, the power of the core here. So I do want you to keep these builds in mind, because while we are going to be talking about, during the card by card breakdown, about the Prof X Cannonball deck, these decks were just as successful for me in my time playing them. And I didn't have as much time with this one as I did with the other 2, but they were just as good, and they're pretty good into it too. So the point I'm trying to make here is there's a lot of anger at Prof X Cannonball, and I think that is justified. But I also think the context in which Prof X Cannonball are currently thriving is a context in which other cards can slot in and thrive as well, as long as they are thought of as cleverly as what Zombies was doing, as what the store manager was doing. This is really well-constructed stuff. This is taking a core of cards and saying, I'm going to beat the pseudo mirror because I know they're a Prof X Cannonball deck, and I'm not going to be that. And I think that's just something that is incredibly impressive to me from both of these players. That said, we're going to do the card by card on El Generico, the Prof X Cannonball version, because I think that's the one that is most likely to be the thing that people who are watching this are seeing. What I'm talking about are like jockeying for position in matchups in the top 100. This is one of those cases where I worry that I'm out of touch, so we're going to talk about the baseline version of the deck so you understand that, how to beat it, and what to do with it. Of course, Kitty Pryde is a key card in this archetype, but she's even more key with the addition of Thena. Thena is such a Kitty Pryde card to an incredible degree. Like, I would say that I think Thena is basically only good in the context of Kitty Pryde, Angela, or Ravonna, and outside of that context is actually much harder to make work. The reason this is true is because these decks are already built to do what Thena wants you to do, which is play Kitty Pryde plus whatever, one card that costs however much you have left. So it's like on 4, you're Kitty and Nocturne. On 3, you're Kitty and Jeff, right? That is what allows Thena to slot in so seamlessly. The work is already being done for her. You're not actually sacrificing anything in deck building. you were already doing this. Angela is an absolute monster. This is, I think, one of the most problematic cards in the entirety of Marvel Snap that no one really talks about as problematic. A regular 210 in the context of this deck. And just think about that number, 210. It's pretty ridiculous. Thena just came out and everyone's like, wow, she's so crazy. Angela's better. Like, be real. This is a better card than Thena. Thena is good because she goes with this and is a reasonable substitute for it. And sometimes maybe Thena on 2 is better than Angela on 2. Rarely. Angela on 2 is absurd. These are both cards that get countered by Red Guardian. I get that, but like they are very much in a relationship where one is stronger than the other. And Angela is the stronger one. Havoc is a bit of a fringe player in this deck, but he has done some very good things for me. Now, this is basically there so that you can do turn 5 after a Ravonna, play Havoc and Prof in the same lane. Havoc will end up being like an 8 power dude. Prof will add an additional power. You have other cards you can move around into there. Havoc is pretty good at that. Do I think he's make or break for this deck? Not really. He was pretty good, but it's not like the kind of thing where it's like, I must acquire Havoc to make this work. I do think he's like probably best in slot, but he's such a niche and narrow role that I'm not sure how much he really moves the needle. I strongly suspect if you were just playing any of these decks without Havoc, putting whatever card in there, it would probably be fine. Thena is a very unique and interesting card, and by that I mean she's second Angela, which means obviously I love her, right? Like, I'm a huge fan of cards that scale as high as what we're talking about here. I definitely enjoy that. However, I would like to highlight A, worse than Angela, B, can be better in the context of Prof. This deck provides all the context needed for this card to actually exceed Angela because it can keep getting power in a Prof lane. That's just fundamentally why she's so good here. Getting power in a Prof lane is obviously very hard to do, and Thena is very good at it. She goes with the Ravonna package. All of this stuff sort of seamlessly melds together into a Swiss Army knife of winning a lot of games of Marvel Snap. It's a powerful combination. Thena is a powerful part of it. And I think having seen all the stuff she has been able to do, even without Prof Cannonball in the deck, I am fairly confident that this is the kind of thing that will actually make it out in a world where they nerf Prof Cannonball. I do feel better about that now, as opposed to a few days ago. White Widow is generically good. Again, like, this is just a pretty good card. It's a good thing that allows us to, like, target a lane with our Prof, so that is a pretty obvious synergy here. But again, this is not a card that's like, oh, I have to have this or the deck doesn't work. It's fine. Like, just running it because it's a good card is a totally acceptable thing to do when you're looking at a deck like this. If a card is good and synergizes with Prof, you're basically fine to do it. That's really all you need to know. And White Widow is good and synergizes with Prof. If you don't have her, I think you can probably still play this. Speaking of cards that are good and synergize with Prof, Jeff kind of synergizes with the entire deck in such a way that he is actually irreplaceable. I do hope that many of the people watching this video do have Jeff already because, you know, I think my audience tends a little bit whaley and spiky, so I kind of hope you do. Ravonna Renslayer might be an actual problem. Like, this card is super good, and I kind of wonder if it's still going to be super good even if they do something to Prof Cannonball. Like, I talked to Lambie Series about this, and I asked him how much, this is on our most recent episode of 8 Cubes, I asked him how much of Ravonna's power do you think is Professor X? Because I got a lot of people in my comments that are like, oh, they should make Professor X a 5/2, that way it won't work with Ravonna. And he said he thought a lot of Ravonna's power was Professor X. And I'm getting less and less sure of that as I see all of these other builds pop up that are doing the Ravonna stuff without the Professor X. Like, I feel like this is just what good cards mid-range is starting to look like. Ravonna finally hit the Zabu breakpoint. There are multiple ridiculous things you can do with this card, and now it is just the key Zabu-esque enabler for a mid-range deck, just like Zabu used to be. Like, that's who she is now. She's hit that point. Sage is one of the cards that really pushed Ravonna, I think, to the breaking point, right? Where we have this core of Ravonna cards where Sage is one of them, Thena is one of them, Angela is one of them, Professor X is one of them. it's just kind of hit the point where you are really doing something unfair. If you've ever played Hope Summers with a Ravonna out into enabling you to play Cannonball and a Sage on the final turn of the game, that's just unfair. It's an unfair thing to do. You basically have two cards that say win the lane. That's gross. It's just a really, really powerful points thing to do, and you have a lot of ways to make it happen. And Sage is, I think, unlike Havoc, a legitimately key part of what makes Ravonna good. Havoc is cool and interesting, but Sage is a big part of her power. Hope Summers exists here to sort of facilitate Havoc. The first person I ever saw doing this, like Hope Summers Havoc, two-step was Gnome Plays. And it sort of gradually made its way into other decks. Safety Blade with the Slayer Blade deck, and now this deck, which is sort of an evolved version of that. It all sort of goes back to this realization that if you cheat Havoc's issues, he ends up being like an actually very good card as a 2/8, right? And so if you manage to turn his downside into not necessarily the biggest downside in the world, that is very good. That sort of gets exacerbated with Professor X. You can go like Ravonna into Havoc Professor X. That's very good too. If somehow you have a Hope Summers on the board, like you just get a lot of energy cheat. That's really what I'm saying. You're cheating a lot of energy here. And Hope Summers enables some of your most broken final turns. Obviously there's like some very ridiculous turns you can like put other stuff in the Prof X lane when you Prof X on 5. You're rarely going to be able to accelerate out an early Prof X outside of Ravonna. Hope doesn't really enable that because you play stuff in her on 4, but she does enable you to make Prof X lanes prohibitively large on 5, which is very good because your whole job is to facilitate the Prof X stuff. She's a valuable piece of this deck. I honestly think this card is broken. This is the card where I think I am the furthest from everyone else, where I think Nocturne is just, I think she's just Jeff, right? I think this card is maybe a little bit worse than 2-drop Jeff, the card everyone acknowledges is the best card in the game. This card is very close to that. And so I think of her as 3-drop Jeff. Like when I saw the list with the Klaw stuff and they had a card that wasn't Nocturne in there, the first thing I did was cut that card to play Nocturne. She is absolutely phenomenal. I don't know why you'd ever not play her. I love her so much. And the more you play her, the more I play her, at least, the more I fall in love with her. This is a very powerful card. And it gives this deck the ability to set up Professor X's in almost unwinnable ways. Because you're moving a Nocturne into the Professor X lane, then Professor Xing it. It's just like, that's basically having a 6-power Professor X. That's pretty stupid. And yeah, having 5 power moving around is very gross. Now, do keep in mind, she will sell some of the time. I have lost games due to Nocturne, for sure. It happens. You just have to deal with it. Accept it. Accept it. Accept that sometimes she'll sell and sometimes she'll win for you, and you just have to take the good with the bad. Okay, so let's talk about him. At this point, I'm fairly convinced Professor X needs a nerf. But what he's doing for the metagame is genuinely useful. This is a card that is helping the metagame to exist in a real way, because if this guy just got like magically deleted out of the game, I think we'd have a lot of Hella decks. I think we'd have a lot of, bounce decks that are very built around not being able to interact with them. You'd have a lot of, generally throw priority, lot of power final turn decks that are very difficult to interact with without the use of your own tools to throw priority. Just not a very fun metagame. And so I do think Professor X is doing something valuable in keeping decks that want to get priority in the spotlight. But I think it's become clear at this point that this guy is a problem. The cure may be worse than the disease. I just hope that they don't remove him entirely. I hope he is still able to do the things that he is meant to do, to deal with the problems that he is meant to deal with. To me, this feels a little bit like when Leech was 4-2. Like, they're going to make a change, probably, and then we're going to be like, yeah, okay, that's probably what it should have been the whole time, right? Like, Leech, this is a card that is preventing the metagame from being bad, but at the same time is almost worse, if not worse, depending on how you feel about him, right? So it ends up not actually being a very meaningful improvement in the metagame. In my dream world, they deal with this and Hella at the same time. I'm not holding out hope, but it is entirely, possible, I guess. Throughout the history of Marvel Snap, there have been a lot of cards that effectively say win a lane, right? And those cards have ranged from, original Blob to Eliath, and Cannonball is just the most recent of them. It is notable that all of those cards have been paired with Professor X. And I think there's just a basic thing we need to talk about here, which is you win Marvel Snap games by winning 2 out of 3 locations. If you fulfill Professor X's quest, which is basically be winning, play Professor X, you win a location, and then you just play whatever card wins another location, whether that be an obscenely large blob or Eliath or whatever, right? Like, whatever it is, and Cannonball is what it is right now. That's unfortunate, I think, because Cannonball is like a pretty cool card in a world where this is not a thing. In a world where you are putting a lot of effort into clogging your opponent to make the Cannonball win happen, where you're doing like Titania Goblin stuff, where you're playing Debris, where you're actually playing multiple cards to make this happen instead of just free rolling it with Professor X, this is a fine and balanced card, but you're free rolling it with Professor X, so it's not, right? Like, this is a card that can exist in a real world when you're actually putting effort in to set that up. If you're like playing Doc Ock or whatever, if you're like doing things that you have to actually sacrifice power for. What makes this deck so powerful is you're making basically no sacrifices. You're not actually going through any of the effort. In fact, instead of making sacrifices, you get to Professor X on turn 4 while you play 2 10s. That's just not okay, right? Like, this is just kind of unreasonable. So I think a lot of people blame Cannonball for this, and I get it. He is the big guy that ends the games. Like, yeah, totally. But I do think that we have to like look at this as a Professor X problem, because it is one. If you were going through the effort of clogging your opponent, Cannonball wouldn't be all that bad, but we're not. We're free rolling it. And that's pretty gross. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for making it to the end of that video. I know there was an unexpected intermission in there. I am as surprised as you, but obviously I'm very grateful. So, as always, thank you so much. I have been KM Best. You have been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one. We're going to go to the gameplay now. You have a good one. Oh, what is this game? Come on. Come on. Nebula. Whoa. Scary. Scary, yeah. Intriguing. Where do they play the Iron Man? Is kind of the realist question we have here. I'm going to snap back, and I'm willing to lose 8 here. I don't think we're losing 8 here. I don't think we're losing 8 here. We were, as it turns out, not losing 8 here. JF. Everyone add him. Hawk. um, I don't know either, dude. I bet you I can find it on Untapped. I'll try to do that. Okay, I found it. Wait, no, I didn't. It's not in there. They're not on Untapped. Okay, no, I did find it. YOLO. Okay, it was fine. I have no idea if we win this game, but I think we do. We'll find out. We do. Hmm. I'm not invited. Yeah, no. I'm not in it. I'm not in it at all. You mean to be rude? It wasn't rude. It's okay. Absolutely 100% okay. Do I go for this? Sure, why not? Nocturne, Sage, where is it going? If we go left with it, we go to 4. We go to 8. And then we're relying on Sage to do the rest, and I don't think that's realistic, but I'm probably going to try it anyway, because I'm fucking stupid. Expected the Shadow King middle. All right, let's see if we can win. I don't think we can. It's 3-3-5-5. We have 4. Sage is going to be 8, correct? Oh, by 1! Holy shit. I refused to do that math. I was just like, I'm not doing it. You can't fucking make me do that math. And I was correct. They couldn't make me do that math. I'm having so much fun. A jolly old time. Five gifts sent out infinite mojo vibes. Mojo vibes. What do you mean by that? Cerebro 3. Not Cerebro 3. Okay, weird. So we can't lose. It's super fun. We kind of just got some bad shit happening there for a lot of those locations. Thena's a pretty good Savage Land card. Never mind. I mean, she still's a pretty good Savage Land card. Dazzler, Iceman, Magic. I'm afraid of a Doc Ock a little bit. Does this work? Let's do it. Holy shit, it does not work. So they play Onslaught, right? Sage is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's either 10. It should win. This should win the game against an Onslaught. This should win the game against an Onslaught or a Gilgamesh. Go to 11 here, right? When they play a card there. All right, let's do it. Salute. Thena procs, end of turn. Pit stains. Just add the text. Doesn't work with Profex. Yeah. Jeff can move there. Why not Cannonball? Yeah. Add the text to Cannonball that says nothing can stop this card from being moved. Cannonball text that says nothing can stop this card from being moved. Hell yes. God, that's awesome. Ravonna Renslayer. Yeah, you are describing Storm, yes. What's their 4? It's like a 4-8, they go to 11, we go to 7, they go -4. We can beat that 4-8. Oh no, they also have demons. We could have beaten that 4-8. I'm a coward. The first play would have shit on him. I'm pretty sure this play also shits on him. I think they might be thinking Odin wins here. It doesn't, because they have a sentry. But if they have like an absorbing man or something, we're going to play around that. Except is Sage worth getting if you're missing Havoc? I think there's kind of a lot you can do without those cards, but it's possible that he is. Not ideal. I'm the guy that retreated twice? Oh, damn. I was wondering. Okay, what's happening? Carnage Venom here. What is this? Now I'm kind of like, is this Phoenix Force? That's so weird. That's just an astonishingly weird play. That actually helps me, I think. That hurts. I think we'll just start doing this kind of stuff. Pumping Thena as much as we can. So that means Killmonger exists, right? I think I can try to play around that, but it's not my favorite thing in the world, right? It's definitely this. No, it's not. It's definitely this. If Killmonger resists, you're guaranteed to lose mid. Right, but they're looking to Killmonger late. So if they're Killmongering late, we use Nocturne to blow up the Mojo. That's sort of what we're setting up here. Are we about to win this game? That's crazy. Klaw is the law. Klaw is the law.